More often, the willingness and the unwillingness to change tend to compromise. The patient then sticks to his resolution to change, but wants to get away with as little as possible. He may hope that it will be enough if he uncovers the origin of the trend in childhood, or if he merely makes the resolution to change. Or he may fall back on the delusion that a mere recognition of the trend will change everything overnight. The new year is upon us, and with that comes all sorts of resolutions to change. If you're the kind of person who can make a New Year's resolution and successfully stick to them, then congratulations, you can click off this video. Or you can stick around and get some insight into the other 95% of us who can't seem to make it more than a week or two before we go back to our old, comfortable patterns of behavior. I'm sure you've wondered once or twice before, why can't I stick to what I'm going to do? Why can't I actually make a change? I want to change. Why can't I? I have an answer that you're not going to like. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just like everyone else. It's not because you have ADHD or autism or because you're a failure or anything like that. You can't change because you're neurotic and you're completely unconscious of it. That hurts to hear, doesn't it? It's not actually meant to hurt, but it does because our culture has put a lot of effort into shirking any real responsibility we have for our situation, and instead projects it onto society to make it feel like it's actually the world that has made you this way. It's the government's fault. It's Trump, it's capitalism, it's environmental racism, it's this and that, and everything else under the sun, but it's definitely not me. In 1980, the third edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-3 for short, was released for clinical use. It got rid of just about every reference to psychoanalytic theory because up until the late 60s, pretty much every psychiatrist was trained in psychoanalysis. But once biological psychiatry came into the picture, psychoanalytic theory had to be pushed out. Medicine became the primary focus of treatment for mental health conditions, and psychoanalysis pretty much faded into relative obscurity. Even today, to find a psychoanalyst in the traditional sense is pretty difficult. The biggest loss that resulted from this change in framework and language was the removal of the terms neurotic and neurosis from our psychological nomenclature. To be called neurotic was too stigmatizing. It was not person-centered. It was demeaning. It was all kinds of things that positive psychologists hate. The bigger issue is that just because we don't call people neurotic anymore doesn't mean that they're not neurotic. Just because we don't use the term anymore doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. We all know people who are seriously neurotic. You may even be seriously neurotic and not even know it. That's the purpose of this video. To give you an idea of how your unconscious neurotic patterns keep you stuck, unable to change, unable to move forward, and unable to achieve the things you want in life. First things first, the meaning of the term neurotic has changed in the last 100 years since Freud. When Freud was describing neurotic people, he was sometimes describing people who went up against the status quo. He thought that women wearing pants was neurotic, people with no desire to work were neurotic, and rock and roll music was extremely neurotic. This isn't how we use the term today. These people would generally be classified as countercultural attitudes, but otherwise well within the norm in terms of their mental health, with exceptions, of course. When I speak here about neurotic trends in the personality, I don't mean the desire to be different or go against cultural or social expectations. When I speak of neurotic trends here, I speak of, in line with Karen Horney's conception of neurosis, deeply conflicting attitudes towards yourself, things, other people, and the world that pull you in two competing directions, ultimately leaving you stretched thin, but stuck in the same place you were before. One of Horney's biggest contributions to psychoanalysis is the idea of the idealized self-image versus the real self. In Jungian terms, this may be akin to the idea of the differentiation between ego and self. Despite how fanciful your beliefs are that you have a certain destiny, or if you work hard you can achieve anything you want, or that God has a plan for you, you're not going to end up where you think you want to be. This can be a crushing realization for most people because they cling to the magical belief that they are different from everyone else, and that things will just work out for them for some unknown reason. Spoiler alert, you're just like all of us. You're not special. And even if you were a very gifted, intelligent, and wonderful person, you are not exempt from the limitations of human existence. The idealized self-image is that idea that you had in your head when you were a kid that you were going to be a baseball player, or a rock star, or an astronaut. You're none of those things. You're on YouTube looking for motivation while you mindlessly scroll Instagram or compulsively engage in bad behavior despite knowing how bad it is for you and how much you hate yourself for not being able to change it. You have to give up on the idea that you can become your idealized self-image. It wasn't possible then. It's not possible now. In fact, it was never possible. If there was any chance that you ever could have been anything else, it would have happened already. The idealized self-image keeps us down because we constantly compare who we truly are to who we think we want to be, which is already a bad idea because our thoughts are being constantly distorted. If you want to change, and this is going to sound completely counterintuitive, you have to not want it so bad. The desire to change makes failure to change all the more painful. It makes you feel like a fucking failure when you desperately want to change something about yourself, but you realize that even if you do have the willpower to try, it's not enough. And now you feel even worse about yourself than you did before. I'll give you a personal example. I quit drinking a year ago, but I didn't quit because I wanted to quit. I quit because I had to. I probably would have kept drinking myself to death had I not gone to the hospital after a seriously lucky break I had while checking my blood pressure one afternoon. I had extreme hypertension and I didn't even notice it. I probably would have had a heart attack in 2025, and I would have never known about it. I was staring death right in the face and I hadn't the slightest idea. If it wasn't for that wake-up call, firstly, I probably wouldn't be making this video, and secondly, I'd either still be addicted to alcohol or, who knows, something even worse. You have to recognize that there are competing neurotic trends within your personality, just like there are in mine. When it came to drinking, the fundamental example was the desire to change, but the really not wanting to deep down. I told myself so many times, I need to quit drinking, or I need to stop drinking so much, and I would say it to my friends all the time too. But I never changed. I never drank less. In fact, I drank more. I ended up drinking so much that my hangovers caused me so much anxiety that I actually went to the hospital for that too. That's when quitting drinking no longer became a choice or a desire, but a necessity. If you don't want to wait until you get to that point to change your behaviors, then you have to discover your competing neurotic trends that are keeping you stuck where you are. Do you neurotically desire independence but also crave intimacy? That's a big psychological problem. Do you neurotically feel entitled to a successful life and despise hard work? That's a problem too. Or maybe you want to stop being depressed, but your depression actually keeps you safe in your room, shut away from the world that causes you anxiety. Here's another, hopefully helpful example. Why do you watch YouTube? The surface level answer is because I'm bored. Yes, I'm sure you're bored. I'm bored too. But maybe the question shouldn't be, why do you watch YouTube, as much as it should be, what are you avoiding by watching YouTube? This question gets us way closer to the unconscious underlying trends that we are so consistently unaware of. Do you watch YouTube in place of doing other things? Things that are hard, require a lot of attention and time? Do you watch YouTube in hopes that you will magically click on that one video that's going to change your life and ignite the spark you're missing? Do you watch YouTube because you literally have nothing better to do? There are unconscious and competing neurotic trends underlying every action, every decision, and every thought we have. We remain stuck because we're unconsciously compromising every time we say we want to change. We're comfortable with where we are, despite what we tell ourselves. We've learned and repeated patterns of thoughts and behaviors for so long that their origins are buried under decades of memories, and yet they dictate every moment of our present lives. How can we discover our own deepest neurotic trends? Well, according to Karen Horney, the only way to do so is by free association. And that can be difficult because not only is finding an analyst incredibly difficult today, but because we're not aware of all of our defenses that are keeping these uncomfortable truths about ourselves hidden. If we were to freely associate, we would still, consciously or unconsciously, avoid certain thoughts, impulses, and emotions because they're too taboo or disagreeable. We would selectively decide which thoughts, emotions, and impulses are appropriate instead of giving free rein to our unconscious because we are, at bottom, afraid of what we would discover about ourselves. We'd be ashamed, embarrassed, confused, and hurt, and the psyche does everything it can to protect itself from these feelings, which makes real self-discovery all the more painful. That's what makes real psychotherapy different from the kind of affirming, empowering therapy we get today as a substitute. I'm not saying that I'm a real therapist or even a good one, but what I am saying is that conventional therapy nowadays does little more than affirm your bad decisions and make you believe that you're perfect the way you are, and unfortunately it's just society or culture that we live in that makes it so hard for you. Trust me, everything you're doing is right and good. You're just up against a mean and scary world. It's laughable because deep down we know that's not true. And sometimes hearing it from a mental health professional makes us think, well, if there's nothing wrong with me, then why am I here? Whether you decide to go to therapy or do some real self-exploration, the goal, if you truly want to change, will be to discover your conflicting neurotic beliefs and really commit yourself to changing everything about your life. Because these trends just don't affect you in one specific realm of functioning, they affect every aspect of you, directly or indirectly. I do want to re-emphasize the point that just because you are neurotic, that doesn't make you a bad person or a failure or any other word that we use to negatively judge ourselves. So often we judge ourselves so incredibly harshly that no other person on earth would think to say the terrible things we think or say about ourselves. You're a good and worthy person despite your neurotic trends. And if you really want help, there are people out there who are willing to help you reach such a commendable goal. I hope that 2026 is a year full of personal growth, contentment, and fleeting feelings of happiness that can offset the inevitable despair of our collapsing world. Until next time.